All right, Dr. Mays, welcome to the podcast. I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I'm just going to jump right in, peppering you with questions.
I love it. Let's go.
Okay, so you have worked with some of the top minds in the country. When did you realize that success on the outside does not immediately translate to the desired experience that people want to have on the inside?
It was a lot of my own journey, right? So it's nothing I learned academically, although that's what it became my course of study. How do you find that internal success? But I remember at one point, I grew up in the era of big boys don't cry. I'll give you
Mhm.
something to cry about. Never let them see you sweat, right? We've seen the
Mhm.
commercials. It's the lifestyle I grew up with. My dad was very stoic, loved the guy, never demonstrated emotion. I learned, and I'm the youngest child in my family. Being the youngest child, I learned a lot of patterns. And that's really what kind of my personality became, was a bunch of ingrained patterns that played themselves out. So I learned to be the pleaser, the guy who always had a joke, the guy who always made everything okay. I was always excellent. When people ask me, how are you doing? I was always excellent.
Uh-huh.
And at one point, I had somebody say, you don't seem excellent. And it was this
Ooh.
wake up like, oh, I really don't feel excellent either. It
Mm.
put me on the journey to actually develop self awareness because I kind of grew up above the neck, right? Like in an engineering world outside of Detroit. My dad worked for the car companies, and real success was an engineering mindset.
Oh.
There was no room for emotion. There was no emotional awareness that I learned. Instead, I learned to just be in this world that was completely cognitive. And when that dissonance happened, that my feeling, in my visceral feeling in my body, didn't match the narrative I was telling, it was like there started to be these cracks or fissures that I
Yeah.
started to feel within myself. It was powerful and profound, learning to be not okay, and to be okay not being okay was absolutely huge. And I think about it too. That's I wrote my capstone project for one grad school I went to, that I called it the dilemma of the male therapist. And that is, the therapist is supposed to be open and vulnerable and receptive and in tune with their emotion. And the male is supposed to be hardened and stoic and strong and impenetrable and infallible. How do you marry those two together? It's a very different story. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, how did you? Tell us.
yeah. Well, what I discovered along the way is that anybody, I mean, it doesn't take strength to act like you don't have anything going on, to repress all your feelings. And, ignorance is bliss. To hide all that doesn't take strength. It takes strength to stand in the middle of your own angst and the
Mm.
sizzle in your own juice, to not be okay in the moment and to be okay with that, to stretch out of your comfort zone. So what I find most people do, and myself too, I was guilty of this, is like I would do whatever I knew would validate my self concept. So my comfort zone was very small, and
Mhm.
as long as I got positive feedback, I would do that thing, but I wouldn't take risks and I wouldn't step outside of doing anything that might invalidate the fragile ego or self concept I had developed. Because, and what was that self concept? Oh, it was to be helpful, be pleasing, always be funny, all of this surfacey stuff. But it didn't allow me to really penetrate and access the deeper person underneath. So it just took a lot of introspection for me, and years and years of meditation, that I realize now you don't have to take that slow path. That was my path. I love it. Now my work is helping people expedite that path. Executives,
Yeah.
to not have to be driven by these patterns they adopted in the first 3 or 5 years of their life, but they can actually exercise conscious choice at a deeper level.
Okay, well, listen, I've got 614 questions for you based on just what you've said. But I want to start with like because what you're saying is like there's something deeper underneath. Like we're told, here's what success, like you said, engineering mindset was success, right? Or corporate ladder climbing is success. There are all of these stories. And what do you find though in your experience? What is it that people are actually like I will say usually people are like this is the thing I want to achieve, and that's like the intermediary, like they want to achieve that because they think that that will give them insert the real desire, right? So what's like the deeper thing underneath that people are really wanting, but we're not necessarily calling it success, but that might actually be the golden nugget.
Well, my experience is we're all on a quest to get our attention needs met. The
Oh,
things we developed early on in our life. Think about it. When you come into the world as a fresh little human, the one thing you must have is attention. Not
yeah.
just food, not just shelter. Because I love it. People say, well, you need food and shelter. I say, great. Put an infant in a little safe room with a can of tuna fish and they're good to go.
This is
Oh,
not
no.
quite. Yeah.
Yeah, we need more than that, right? We need,
Hmm.
and what we know now, we need touch, we need affection, we need love, we need, and that provides all the other things. So, our quest, the beautiful thing is we come into the world without the software. We don't have our minds formed. And in those first few years of our lives, we're forming like 1 billion neural connections a day that is starting to form our personality. We learn, stimulus and response. If I do this, this happens. If I do this, this happens. And it's brilliant to watch, like birth order, how much that plays itself out. My family is textbook. My oldest sister, family hero, did everything right according to all the rules. Yes, right. You're
Who
the
is the
family.
oldest
Yeah,
in
no,
the
you have the
room?
wave.
Thank you,
Of
thank you.
course you
Who's the
do. Oh my
oldest?
goodness. And
Uh-huh.
then let's see if this. How many siblings in your
Two.
system?
Yeah.
Two. Oh,
Uh-huh.
and the younger was a sister.
Brother, 6 years
Oh,
younger. Hmm.
okay. So then he adopted, because of that 5 year gap, he probably adopted a lot of those characteristics too, being the only boy. And then you're 6 years older. So he became probably a lot of the hero himself. When it's closer together, and this is the cool thing, I watch this happen. I watch it with my own family. I see it myself. Oldest family hero. Next one becomes the rebel, bucking it because they compare themselves against the older.
Yeah.
So they're the ones who build their family outside of the family, and they run against trying to find their identity. And then the youngest, this is the cool thing that happens, right? When for the oldest, when the next one comes home, their role changes completely. They're no longer the baby in that instant. Now they're the big boy, big girl at 2 years old.
Mhm.
So now you take the baby and there's nobody to take that role. So when I'm 50 years old and when I go home to see my mom rest in peace, when I did, I what happens? I get cast back. I'm still the baby. I'm still the one who, my older siblings would say, I'm special in mom's eye. I'm the favorite. I get away with everything. The rules don't apply. But then the other side is I get no respect, right? I mean, my
Uh-huh.
oldest sister, boy, she gives the conference in Paris. Everybody talks about that. I publish a new book. It's just the schlep thing Kevin does.
Yeah, this like little, bestseller or something, no
Right,
big
right,
deal.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh-huh.
and so my wife and I are both psychologists, right? And we watch our children. We have two boys. It's phenomenal. They do the same thing. And we're watching these kids, like the oldest, he's the one who does everything he's supposed to. He follows the rules, and he follows the rules definitely better than I do,
Hmm.
right? He's like he's meticulous about how we do things. The youngest, there are no rules. The rules don't apply. I'm like, how are we doing this?
Yeah.
It's just a product of the system, and we're complicit in it. But it's just phenomenal
Yeah.
to watch it play itself out, and to know that this is the patterning. The software is being laid down in the first 3, 5, 7, 10 years of our lives, and I can predict how my children will be behaving 5 decades from now. And it's the secret to their success, and it'll be their Achilles heel. The same with you. If you're the
Uh-huh.
oldest, you're the family hero. Maybe you take too much on. Maybe you
Uh-huh.
drive too hard sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Maybe, right, you
Yeah.
do it all yourself because, as mom said, you want it done right, you do it yourself, and so you end up doing
You don't
that.
know me, Kevin. You don't know me.
Isn't
Uh-huh.
it wild to see?
Yeah.
So my question with all this is, well, where's free will in all this? Is there such a
Yeah.
thing as free will, or are we just replicating this pattern, this kind of
Yeah.
this neuro framework that we established early on? Are we
Yeah.
just playing that out over and over, and we continue to think the same way we always did?
Okay, so let's get into that. Like, where is free will and all this? Because something that you talk about is like before you can lead others, you have to lead yourself,
Yes,
right? So this
yes,
is where
yes, yes, yes.
self-awareness and self-agency and self-sovereignty and
Hmm.
so talk to us about free
Well,
will.
that's the beautiful thing. I
Yeah.
was just in in Athens. I took my family, went to spring break in Greece. We walked in the footsteps of Socrates. And what did Socrates say? The unexamined life is not worth living. And what does
Right.
that mean? So when we were over there, I was studying Socrates. What does he mean by unexamined life? And all those words you just said, dead on.
Yeah.
That ignorance is bliss, but to live truly our best potential is to cut through all of that. And to sometimes when we cut through that, though, they're under the surface, those feelings we don't like that we've been hiding.
Yeah.
We'll have to learn to come to terms with that, to come to
Mhm.
terms with our own guilt and our own shame and our own fear and our own sadness. And
Yeah.
that's a hard recipe for a guy who learned to be tough, or you who learned to
Yeah.
be the strong family hero who takes care of everybody, the nurturer who's going to look out for everybody else. How do you look out for yourself? How do
Yeah.
you sometimes put yourself first and not take care of everybody else?
Yeah.
There's the pattern, right? And but so the starting point with awareness is the starting point. Learning how to be self-aware. Well, that's half. That's one side of the coin because there's no such thing as awareness without presence. So the two really
Mhm.
go together. Learning how to be present in this moment, here and now. And I
That's
love it.
literally what my tattoo says. Well, I think. I mean, it's in Sanskrit, so I mean, it might not
Wait, let me
say
see
this.
that. I know Sanskrit.
Shut, are you serious?
Oh,
No, stop. You're like, actually, it says F off. Let's hope not. But it says be here now, right? Like that's my,
right, right.
yeah, reminder.
Well, and that's the only thing there is,
Yeah.
except distraction. There's and
Yeah.
disassociation. There's
Yeah.
presence and there's but where do most people live, right? If we live in the future of anticipation, then we create fear and anxiety for ourselves about what
Yeah.
we think is going to happen.
Yeah.
Or when we lose that presence and slip into past thinking, we create guilt, shame, anger, regret, all this host. Most of the emotion
Warm
we
fuzzies.
experience is just conditional based
Oh,
on the narrative we're telling ourselves.
yes.
Or we distract and we're not here, we're somewhere else in our phone, paying attention to what some other conversation, some other place, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And we're missing all we really have is
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
right here, right now. Yes, yes,
Be here now.
yes.
Yeah.
Imagine if you could master that.
Well, okay, Doc, give us some, because in our industries, like we throw out terms like self-awareness
Mhm.
and being present as if those are like self-evident skills that like, we just kind of like baked in our little human baby flesh suits that you're talking about. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
some people are like, yeah, okay, what does that look like? Right? Like, what
Yeah.
does self-awareness, what's the like start, what's the trailhead? If you're like,
Well,
here's,
I love the notion of self awareness for me is key because I grew up right above the neck. So, what is self awareness? It was a very cognitive thing.
right.
And then I realized, I remember when I was in grad school, I had a professor. I asked, well, how do you gain this self awareness? Oh, he said, just check in with yourself. And I thought, that's the worst response I've ever heard. And
Mhm.
that put me on a
Ah,
path of exploration. How do you become self aware? And I realized, oh, there's self awareness of different, almost like different wisdom doors within us. One
mhm.
is through our thinking, absolutely. But two is in that body awareness. Everything that happens in us, there's some physical correlate, right? I mean, when we get upset, it's something physical happens in our body. When we're happy, something physical happens in our body. And there's this flight or fight or flight that happens, but it happens so subtlety. Our survival is not at stake, our ego identity is at stake. And when that gets challenged, the sympathetic nervous system takes over.
Yeah.
We begin to think differently, act differently, perceive differently. And for me, the work was learning how to become aware of the sensations in my body as they arise and as they pass.
Yeah.
That's where the power has been for me.
Okay, listen, let's stop right there for a second because you used the word power. And this is so important because I don't know about you, but I work with a lot of folks who are similar to how you were and how I were. We're like, I am just a floating head and I experience the world between my two ears. And we are very professional people and we are high achieving. We've got big dreams, we got big goals. We're doing very important things out in the world. What does my body have to do with that? Right. So when I invite somebody, I'm like, could we tell me where that is in your body? And they're like, I will rip off your head and throw rotten tomatoes at you, right? Like there's
Yeah.
so much, again, I am not globally speaking, but so often the people I work with experience a sense of resistance, hesitation. I am self-proclaimed reluctant participant, I'd like to call myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I've found there's so much value, like there's so much freedom that comes when you learn to relate to the body sensations you have and you are not captive to them. Like this is where freedom comes. This is where power. I say, when there's no
Yes.
feeling that you're unwilling to feel, there is nothing you're unwilling to do. And yet we're like, I do
That is,
not want,
hold on, back
yeah,
up and say that again. Say
yeah.
that statement
Yeah.
again.
If there's no feeling you're unwilling to feel, there is
Mhm.
nothing you're unwilling to do.
That's so brilliant. And it's true.
Right.
Absolutely true. But we stay in that comfort zone of validation, which gives us, we're hedonistic. We get the positive feeling, and
Yeah.
because that's comfortable, and we move towards that in our blind automaton robotic state without even knowing we're doing it.
Yeah. Mhm.
There's the lack of free will.
Yeah.
So I love, there's a Buddhist model, the five skandhas, right? That was
Okay.
originally written in Pali, then Sanskrit. But what it would say is this: the way we think, our relationship with the world, we might have a little backwards, and
Uh-huh.
it ties into exactly what you're saying. So we have consciousness. Well, first we have a body,
Yeah.
and then we have consciousness or cognition,
Mhm.
right? We have this open registry, and then something enters into it. The object of our perception is recognition, recognition. We compare it against our mental Rolodex.
Yeah.
And in our mind, we make a value judgment. And in that moment, it releases a positive sensation or a negative sensation.
Mhm.
And our mind reacts to the sensation, not the thing that we're perceiving. We're
Right.
reacting to the sensation in our own body, or reacting out of the sensation,
Yeah.
pushing away from what we don't like and pushing towards what we do. And it's so brilliant what you said, because for me, I love the word equanimity.
Yeah.
Equanimity, being present in the moment, regardless of what's happening, whatever the sensation is.
Yeah.
It's so wild too how people run away, and myself as well, from what's uncomfortable, embarrassment, shame, what have you. But when you boil it down, there's nothing more than a cognitive concept, a thought, and a
Mhm.
feeling in your body. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
But we somehow live our whole lives like resisting and building these patterns, these walls against this, and we
Yeah.
constrict our energy, we constrict our aliveness, we constrict our lives, and we end up just kind of living a mediocre life.
Yeah. Like that's like increasing our capacity to be with the full spectrum of human emotions, right? When you talk about free will, right? Like this is what I think about. This is where we have so much more free will when we're comfortable with that. And so for listeners who are like, if y'all are tracking, you're like, this sounds kind of familiar to the steer model where the T stands for thoughts and then it creates an emotion. So I think of when I think of self-awareness. So if anyone, is like, let me track with this question of how do I develop self-awareness? First of all, reach out to me. I will send you the steer model so that you can practice what you're talking about is being reflective. Like when this thing happened out in the world,
Mm-hmm.
what did my brain tell me about that? And when my brain
Mm-hmm.
told me that, what did my body tell me about that? Right? Like, yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah. And I think again, another word you threw with like self-awareness and then presence. Presence, like I love this is a phrase I will often say to my client. Can we be present to the experience you are having of that? Right? Like just even like saying that, she's like, what is it like to be present to the experience that I'm
Mm-hmm.
having with uncertainty about the next step in this thing, right? Or fill in the blank, right? So that's one thing, that's where my brain goes. Tell me when you like equanimity and presence, tell me what are some of those like action steps, building blocks when you're supporting people in cultivating and curating presence. What does that look
Yeah.
like?
So, how to cultivate presence, I think, is $1 million question.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
and
have the answers, right, Doctor? Yeah.
well, the recognize for me, it's a pathway. It's a
Yeah.
pathway of. It's not just about presence. It's about developing wisdom. We all have the ability to develop wisdom within ourselves, and wisdom for me is very different than knowledge. I know a lot of people with a lot of knowledge who don't have any wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom. So it is about being aware of the patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of behaving, not and to be able to objectively observe them as they manifest within you. For me, that's the work. So how do you develop presence? For me, the most powerful tool is the simplest one. Just focus on your breathing. Your breathing is an anchor to the present moment. So if you
Mm-hmm.
can come back to that, practice coming back. And my experience is when I do that after I haven't been doing it for a while or after a busy day,
Mhm.
my mind is wild and it reacts against. And what's that look like? Reacts against being present or being
Yeah.
focused or me being able to control my attention. This
Yeah.
is powerful from my perspective. That when you can control your attention,
Yeah.
then you start to gain mastery in your life. But most people, when they try to just focus on their breathing for just 2 minutes, what's the first thing that happens? Their mind takes off. It goes here and it goes there and it goes all these other places. It doesn't. It resists against being present
Yeah.
because that's how it gets its livelihood, right? Our little ego self concept needs to, when we're present, then it opens the door for the reality that, oh, these are just concepts I developed and there's really nothing real about it.
Uh-huh.
It's just these old, outdated, it's like we programmed ourselves
Yeah.
with this software when we came into the world.
Yeah.
And now we're operating on software that's 30,
Yeah.
40, 50 years old. It's
Yeah.
time for an upgrade. It comes
Yeah.
back to, in my mind, practicing. It's a discipline of
Yeah.
presence. Like you go to the gym and work out, you have to have a mental discipline that allows you to put all the narrative down and just focus. And so for me, I love just the exercise of focusing on my attention and the sensation of my breath entering and leaving. It's so easy. Well, it's so simple, not easy. Simple to do because it's always there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to like offer this up that like because what you're saying is like there's going to be this part of you that is threatened by that, so it's going to resist it. So I like to get ahead of that with people like listen, of you expect the resistance, right? Like I always think
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I knew you'd come. Good to see you. Have a seat. You can
That's
go
part
get in
of
the
it.
back." Yeah.
So, and for me, I love it. The work isn't just focusing on your breathing, but I'll say, for 2 minutes, what if you just focused on your breathing? And when your mind wandered, you noticed it and you welcomed it back. And
Yeah.
it's not about, you notice there's two instructions: focus on your breathing. And when your mind wanders, bring it back. So, with the expectation, your job is to be the objective observer of the narrative, of the mind's projection as it comes up. And the
Mhm.
more you can do that, then you change the relationship with your mind.
Yeah.
So it's not owning you the same way. It's just a pattern of thoughts that are kind of
Yeah.
rolling through. And that same way you think will continually play itself out. Again, for me, decades later, I find I still think the same way. And sometimes it shoots me in the foot.
Yeah.
So, but without awareness, I know I'm right. So I
Yeah.
keep doing the same thing and
Right.
not getting the result I want.
Yeah.
With awareness, I'm in a position of choice.
Yeah. And again, that's where the power is, right?
Yes, yes.
This is because what you're talking about is like if you can bring awareness to this, because you said there's nothing real about it, right? Like when we think
Mhm.
about, whenever somebody says, I'm a people pleaser, or I say, I'm like, okay, let's edit that a little bit. Like you are
Mhm.
somebody who engages in people pleasing behaviors, right? But
Mhm.
again, there's that ego. You're like, I am this thing. But as you said, you're like, there's nothing real about it. And when we can become the observer, then you have the choice and the power to say, oh, I get to rewrite the narrative. I get to rewrite the story.
Yes.
The personality
Upgrade
structure
the
is not,
software.
yeah, is not
Upgrade the
finite.
software.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's literally
Well,
the
and
name of
you,
my YouTube channel is the human OS, the human operating system, right? Because this is what we're talking
yes,
about.
yes,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. No, I
Yeah.
love it too. I'm a people pleaser. Oh, no, you learned that legitimately that when you made others happy, you got your attention needs met. And that's the role that you were cast into and you cast yourself into. That's the programming. Brilliant. There's your DOS programming. Do
Right.
you think it's time for an upgrade? Does it ever not work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, it does sometimes not work for you. Well, let's I like to say uproot those patterns
Yep.
through. Now we talked about presence. The thing I love about focusing on your breath, if you focus on the sensation of your breath, you start to strengthen the mental muscle, not only of presence but of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is key. Just practicing that mental skill set, getting more and more familiar with becoming aware, because the breath is so subtle, but there's a sensation as it enters and leaves. And then what I discovered over time, over months and months and months and months of meditation, is that there's stuff going on in my body I never even knew. And you can become aware of the energy in your body.
Yeah.
In my mind, an energetic or subatomic level, something, if somebody would have told me that, I would have said they were daft. And
Uh-huh.
then when I started to actually realize that you can dial in your attention to a single point that is so refined, you can become aware of what's going on within your corporeal body at any given moment, and then start to notice, oh, I'm getting hot. Oh,
Mhm.
my neck's getting tight. Oh, look, now I'm yelling at that person, right? But before
Mhm.
the reaction happens externally, without exception, something happens physiologically.
Yeah, that's like it's like the tail wagging the dog, right? Again, this keeps going back to that
Mhm,
free will and the
mhm,
power.
mhm.
This is how, like, if y'all are putting the pieces together, this is how you start showing up on purpose in your life, right? And this is how, like this, you're learning how to partner well with your brain. Like these are the skill sets for it, right?
Mhm,
And because
mhm.
when people are like, I always do this thing and like I don't know, I can't stop doing it. This is the path out. Like those habituated things are like bring awareness to it so that you have the ability to interrupt and choose again, right? When you're like, I can dial. Also, I want to
Mhm.
say, as you were talking about, you're like dialing in attention to a single point. Like, think about this, friends. You make yourself highly marketable and valuable in a world where attention is like a rare commodity, right? With
Mhm,
phones and
mhm.
social media and 7-second attentions that through the videos. If you're somebody who like, I have the skill of attention, like, okay, you're like a rare creature in this world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. To be able to control your attention and to place it where you want it is not a skill set we really learn.
Yeah.
In fact, in my experience, we learn to manage and manipulate the world around us, not the world within us. And
Ooh, that's so good.
true
Yeah.
mastery, it doesn't matter how much you know.
Uh-huh.
At some level, especially, right? I think about the evolution of somebody to become an executive. They become an executive because they're really good at getting a task done, right?
Yeah.
They produce. And then there's this somehow we believe that if somebody's a great producer, how do we recognize them? We promote them, and it's a different skill set. The more we
Uh-huh.
get promoted, the more it's a different skill set. The more it's about
Uh-huh.
getting things done through others, through relationships, through empowering, through visioning, creating a culture. And it's so different than being exceptional as an engineer or a physician or a lawyer or whatever the thing is. So being able to understand that the power in being, if you want to be truly successful at the highest level, you've got to learn to turn your attention inward, understand
Yeah.
the patterns of thinking, patterns of feeling, patterns of behaving, and realize that you are not those patterns. Those
Mm-hmm.
patterns are just something it's the software you picked up. Guess what? Some of them have viruses, and the
Yeah.
viruses will definitely undermine you. But without awareness, I love it when without awareness, when the virus hits me, I call it my ghost takes over. And
Yeah.
then the caveman comes out. I behave differently. And in those moments, I know I'm right. I know you're the idiot, and I'm going to tell you.
Yes.
And it doesn't ever get me what I want.
Turns out not a lot of forward movement. But I like
No.
what you said, I am not those patterns. And again, that's
Mhm.
so helpful. Like, again, when I was sort of saying like you're not a people pleaser, you engage in
Yes.
these behaviors. But I like
Yes.
the way you say, I am not those patterns because one, there's like an unshaming process to that,
Mhm. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And there's like a little more willingness. Like you start, there's a little open. I mean, I don't know, try it on. I always invite people, try on that thought. I
Mhm.
am not those
Mhm.
patterns. See what it feels like in your body. But
Mhm.
usually there's a little bit of, oh, I can look at those patterns. I can talk about them, right? Because when I know I am not them, there's a little bit of distancing. And that just, again, takes away a little some of the guilt, shame, blame stuff that keeps us in spirals.
Well, it's interesting you say, does it take it away? In my mind,
Oh, tell me.
avoiding trying to take it away because we
Yeah.
resist against it. And that's what sets the whole thing up. What if you were just okay with it? What if you didn't react to it? So one of my favorite clients, she runs a large restaurant group. She
Mhm.
owns it, and she has developed. She was a perfectionist when she was young, figure skater, oldest child, family hero, did everything for everybody, immigrant family. She was always the one who was dialed in. And
Mhm.
she has to be, it's a hard combination of perfectionist and pleaser.
Yep.
And when she's not perfect and pleasing everybody, she feels guilty.
Mhm.
Now is the work to stop feeling guilty or just feel guilty.
Allow it. Yeah.
And so we've reframed it as guilt is her friend.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Recognize when it's there. How do you know? Oh, your mind starts to swirl. Oh, there it is again. Oh, you can feel the tightness. You feel the symptoms in your body. Brilliant. Here it is. Hey, old
Mhm.
friend. And the
Mhm.
more of my experience, it's not about the emotion and the experience of it, it's a relationship with it. Because when you stop resisting against the guilt, then the guilt kind of starts to diminish over time. And pretty soon it's not even a thing because we expand our comfort zone in that way. When we
Yeah.
resist against it, we don't like it. We label it as bad. We don't want to feel it. So we push against it. We want it to go away. I remember public speaking the first time, and I was freaked out, afraid of it,
Uh-huh.
and trying not to. So I'm going to act like I'm not afraid, push the
Uh-huh.
fear down.
Yep.
And I just cracked under pressure. It was miserable. And
Yeah.
over time, I recognized it's not about getting rid of the fear. What if I just allowed myself to be a complete idiot and
Yeah.
forgot about it? And the word in my head was be the fool. And
Yeah.
I went up there and I said, I'm going to be the fool. And it's so
Huh?
weird that this fear, the other side of it in my mind, when you release it, it becomes excitement. And suddenly I had this larger energy. And now one of my favorite things to do is a keynote with 1,000 or 2,000 people. I love it. I
Yeah.
thrive in it. But before, when I was trying to hold it back,
Right.
paralyzed me.
Yeah, I was just working with someone yesterday. Again, these I'm thinking of the high achiever type, the Enneagram threes in the crowd, right? And
Threes,
you're like, we
you
don't want to
threes
talk
among
about
you.
feelings,
The
right?
boss man.
Uh-huh. And I was like, well, could we just be with this sensation for like 10 seconds? That's like my little in. I'm like, we're just gonna do it for 10 seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
right away, what she was saying was, she's like, oh, at first I noticed like I was like pushing it away and I felt like almost like a headache, right? And she's like, but because I would say things like, hey, we're just gonna witness it. We're not gonna hurry it. Like, could we just allow it to be here? We're just gonna be curious about it, let it do its thing. She's like, yeah, when I did that, she's like, it felt heavy, but not that same level of pain. I'm like, yes, so many of us think that the anxiety or guilt is what we're experiencing is the resistance to it. And we're like, that's wildly uncomfortable. I'm like, you don't even know what guilt and anxiety feels like, right? Like, because so many of us are feeling resistance, not the actual
Mm-hmm.
sensation. So,
Well,
yeah.
it gets tied in with fear, like it's going to swallow us up somehow.
Oh, there's that. Yeah, yeah. I'm afraid
Yeah,
if I
right.
feel it that I can't get out of it.
Right. And so again, it's the relationship we have with it, not the thing itself.
That's right. That's
Because
right.
the thing itself, what is it? It's a
Yeah.
sensation in your body.
I know.
It's a thought in your mind. There, that's it. And
That's
it
the running joke. I
arises.
call them vibrations, and my clients will be like, I'm having a vibration. Yes, you are.
I love it. I think of it as just a sensation.
Yeah.
That's all the emotion is a
Yes.
sensation in your body
Mm-hmm.
and a thought married with a thought in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And guess what? The nature of everything, like the seasons, it arises, it
Yep.
sustains, and it passes away if you let it. But if you block it, then
Yeah,
it builds and it builds. And then that's the stuff you end up having to carry.
that's right. Yes. Okay. So you have talked about how your own journey has included some wild experiences.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah. So tell us about some of those experiences, some of the aha moments, like some of the things that
Mm-hmm.
maybe cracked you open or shifted things for you.
So, growing up outside of Detroit, Michigan, my dad worked for Buick for 34 years, right? If you're going to do anything worth your salt, you get a job at the largest company on planet Earth. Everything else is a Mickey Mouse company. So, cut the mold, go to school, become an engineer. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
studying engineering, but it's not really at a core of who I am. I know I'm doing that because I'm supposed to. So I actually studied aeronautical engineering. So because my dream was, you know what? I'll be the engineer, but I'll fly airplanes and I
Uh-huh.
can end up being a pilot. So now here I am studying engineering, which was miserable, and flying airplanes so I could travel, trying to fulfill what I believed I was supposed to do.
Mhm.
And I remember I was so bored flying airplanes because when you're in a Cessna in flight school, for a long time you practice straight and level flight and you practice crabbing into the wind, so you go one direction even though the wind's coming, and you track your shadow along the ground and try to follow a street or what have you.
Mhm.
Okay. I was like beating my head against the wall, and my instructor showed me how to do some basic maneuvers. Like if you get
Mhm.
up into your flight zone, pull back the wheel, the airplane will stall, and then you kick the rudder, and the airplane rolls over, and now you're in a spin. It was miraculous, and I loved it. And I
Uh-huh.
would do it again and again and again. But what unfortunately can happen, you're in the zero gravity, and everything's floating around the cockpit, and you're upside down. And I remember one time specifically,
Mhm.
I pull the wheel back and the stall horn goes off and the plane is about ready to drop out of the sky. And then I kick the rudder so it rolls over and I'm watching him spiraling upside down towards this lake. And it was just beautiful. Everything's kind of floating around in chaos. But in my teenage self, who knew everything, I didn't learn the techniques as well as I might have. I was very um, welcoming to risk. I'm not a risk averse guy at all.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm in this airplane spiraling towards the ground, and I overcorrected to come out of it. Now, Cessnas are innately stable. If you take your hand off the wheel, it'll right itself. I
Okay.
overcorrected. I come out and I'm upside down. And the only way out now is all the way through. So I have to pull the wheel back and I'm diving straight towards the ground. And I'm trying to pull up, and I pull up just above the trees, and I'm pulling the wheel back as hard as I could. Now, the Cessna is only designed to go a certain speed. I mean, the never exceed speed, the warning's going out, the safety warning, the buzzer is buzzing. I'm skating just above the trees. And when you do that, you increase the G force. So the blood is now starting to come out of my head. And I'm pulling back the wheel, starting to have what they call a gray out, right? So everything, my whole vision starting to kind of go in, and I'm starting to pass out, pulling the wheel back, skating above the trees. And I am totally in that reactive state at this moment, right? Watching my life flash before my eyes,
Yeah.
this close to death. And at some moment, this flash of lightning in my brain went off. And it was this realization, Kevin, this is not the career path for you.
Maybe I don't want to fly planes. Turns out I will
Yeah.
literally try to kill myself with this. Uh-huh.
So I literally landed the plane, sold my car, and bought a motorcycle, way against my mother's dismay. I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
have to do something. And I took off with a backpack across the country from Michigan. And I just kept going and going and going and going until I went up to Seattle. I went all the way through Wyoming, up to Seattle, down the Pacific Coast Highway. And as I'm driving, I had this old Honda 750 Super Sport, right? And it had this a chain drive motorcycle, and the chain would stretch out. And when it did, you could move the back wheel back. No big deal. But over time, the chain will wear off the sprockets. And now I'm on the Pacific Coast Highway, and I can hear the motorcycle. It has a cadence that it's not supposed to have. And the chain keeps popping off, and the wheel's back as far as it would go. So it's basically completely breaking down. And I ran completely out of money. So I ran out of money. I don't know anybody for 2,000 miles. There's no connection. There's no cell phone, no lifeline, nothing like that. And my motorcycles broke down. I was broke down, and at the end of the road, just
It
south
sounds
of.
like a country song, Dr.
I
Kevin.
know it, man. It was. And I was in Carmel, and outside of California, right?
Oh, at least
Not
in a
outside of
pretty
Carmel.
place.
It was pretty, and there I am, and I've been on the road for a couple of weeks, and I'm grimy, and I got my little pup tent on the edge of the coast there, and I'm looking out across the water, and it was starting to rain a little bit. I wasn't completely broke. I had $4, so I had my $4. I'm thinking, what on earth did you get into now? And I could feel the waves of anxiety, just like the waves I'm watching crash over the shore and below me on the cliffs. I'm like, I'm at the end of the road. Now what do you do? And I just remember sitting there and feeling this intense anxiety. And I was starting to tune in to the feeling in my body like, oh crap, now what? I've got nothing. I know nobody. I'm broke. And I remember sitting there, and it was the same thing, like that flash of lightning as I'm watching the horizon. A little flash happened, and something shifted in my mind. And I realized, wait a minute, I've got nothing to lose.
Mm.
Every decision at this point is 100% up to me. There is nothing to fall back on, no one to blame, no excuses, no rationalizations, no justifications. Everything that happens right now is up to me and nobody else. And it felt like a window opened. The universe opened in that moment. It was absolutely phenomenal. I ended up, pardon me. So now I'm in the California hills. Through a series of events, I'll circle back to. I ended up living right on the edge of Pebble Beach in Carmel, over the ocean, with a hot tub, with meeting all these people. It's like the things happened that never would have happened when I stripped out all the patterns, when I let go of everything. I couldn't be the person I used to be. I had to be the person who could do whatever it took to make things happen. And they did. It's amazing. And the universe provided in ways. I feel like normally I realized we move through the world with blinders and we don't even know we're doing it. It's all this patterning becomes a blinder. We just keep, and then we're stuck in a routine, looking at the world the same way over and over and over. And in that moment, the blinders were ripped off. And I realized the magnanimity, what's the word I'm looking for? How magnanimous the universe absolutely is. because
Uh-huh.
things started happening that I never could have predicted. It's
Yeah.
just things started showing up when I
Uh-huh.
got out of my own way, when I was
Yeah.
truly open and dialed in with my own kind of my own presence, my own energy.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So that to the extent that now to me, this was a huge turning point in my existence, put me
Mm-hmm.
on a path to deep study around how do we manifest? How do we
Mm-hmm.
create things? How do we develop presence and awareness? To the fact that I studied academically over and over and over in many different degrees again and again. At one point, I ended up as a consultant for a consulting firm in North Carolina, and I knew it was time to leave. I, my wife and I pulled out a map, said, "Where do you want to go?" We found a new town in Michigan. We're originally from Michigan, but a totally different, couple hundred miles away. Found a new town we had never been to, came up over one weekend, bought a house, went back, sold the house, quit the job, packed the truck, moved up here. My wife, who stayed home with two kids, and I started a business. And I said, this is going one direction and one direction only. I know how this works. And oh my goodness, it was like a rocket ship. And
Mm.
all of it was back to just that trust and that knowing that, you know what, if I can calm down my own narrative and get out of the way and create a vision, the universe is not a logical linear place. The universe is magical. When you learn to manage your thinking with your thoughts, you create the world. 100%. It starts and ends with you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, listen, as a mindset coach, this is what we're doing thought work all the time. You're
Yes,
talking
yes.
like, so I would love to hear the language you use because when I was hearing you talk about like these moments where you're like the on the coast moment where you're like, I have to get out of my way. And you said something like you take off the patterns. Like when the language I would use is when you can take off the patterns of the false self, the like
Mm-hmm.
the personality structures that like again we are
Mm-hmm.
not that right like we aren't
Mm-hmm.
actually the Enneagram 3 or the 1 or Myers-Briggs like we're not that those are the patterns I would think of and then
Yeah.
if we can remove those if we can get unblocked friends if we can remove the blocks to the awareness
Yes.
of what I would call the true self the true nature the essence within that's the
Mm-hmm.
language I would use what would you how do you describe when you're talking about when you can take off those patterns
Yeah.
then what do you get to access.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful because that is really the point at which we go beyond language. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The patterns exist within the realm of like our left hemisphere, our language, our
Mm-hmm.
thinking in that way. So you have to let go of language, in my mind, to really step fully into it. As
Mm-hmm.
soon as you put a word on it, a label on it, you constrict it, and then that
Mm-hmm.
becomes part of the blockage. You see it in
Mm-hmm.
every religious tradition, where
Mm-hmm.
once they say this is it, then they're all focused on that thing as
Yep.
opposed to this thing.
Yeah.
So I love it. It is the total unblocking continually. And how do I think of it? Your energy, your spirit, your soul,
Mm-hmm.
your awareness, your aliveness, your potential, your God given right, your connection to the holy. It depends on what speaks for the other person.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Uh,
Jesus within you.
yeah.
I don't care what you call it, but when
Same.
you put down all of your ideas and all of your notions and all of your concepts,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to open the door to this deeper potential, right? And I
Yeah.
love this saying of Rumi, the poet Rumi, one of my favorites. What's he
Mm-hmm.
says, out beyond our ideas of what's right and what is wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Because when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. And ideas and notions, even the concept each other, just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. All
Right?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know
My
you're
little like
feeling me.
my insight essence is like, yes, we're clapping and jumping up and down. So okay. So because some people like when we listen to this, we're like, okay, yeah, we're talking about existential stuff here. We're like talking about the nature of the universe and our existence. And so and removing all these patterns and like tapping
Mhm,
into that truth, out in the field beyond, right?
mhm,
And so how then do you start to integrate? Because when you talk about you do executive leadership coaching, that
mhm,
is like some left brain, right? Like
mhm, mhm,
structures and
mhm,
boxes
mhm.
and rights and wrongs.
Yes, yes,
How do
yes.
you integrate those things?
It's so fun. So I worked for a consulting firm down in North Carolina, and it was beautiful because I ran a 5-day executive development workshop.
Hmm.
And so I'd have 10 people in my program for a week.
Hmm.
And it started, we actually had two different rooms. One looked like a classroom. We would go through data.
Mm-hmm.
and data analysis from the feedback of the 360 assessment and look at the Myers-Briggs and all the numbers and all this stuff. And then would move over to the other room, which had no tables, just seats in a circle.
Uh-huh.
And we would start to enter into this deeper way of knowing
Yeah.
without them knowing. They went to leadership boot camp.
Uh-huh.
On day 3, I would say, we're going to try a breathing exercise, and I'd have people just lay down for this exercise in case you get dizzy because you're going to breathe differently,
Yeah.
and go through the holotropic breathwork process.
Yeah.
And it was so phenomenal to watch hardened executives crying like babies on the floor, realizing, separating, breaking through those patterns and seeing the impact it's been having, the negative impact they've been having. And more than once, I would get a fruit basket from a spouse a couple of weeks later saying, I don't know what happened. He went to leadership camp. He's a different guy.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. For me, I always tie it in terms of results.
Yep.
What are the results you want? Your beliefs drive your behaviors to get results. Let's only talk about results. Brilliant. You want different results? What are the results you want? Let's make it measurable. How are you going to do that? You have to behave different. And how are you going to behave different? You have to think different. Yep. And in order to think different, you have to understand what your patterns of thinking are, your ego identity. Now we're opening the door to a much bigger conversation, all in pursuit of results. Yeah. The beautiful thing is, too, sometimes what people identify as the symptom of the problem is not the problem at all, right?
Yeah.
And they realize then, oh, I'm living my life out of balance this whole time. I want them to show up, but I'm not showing up. Or I'm stuck in this pattern. I see it in founders all the time. Founder syndrome, where they don't let go of the reins. They take everything on themselves and they end up down in operations trying to do everything themselves, and everybody else becomes disengaged, saying, fine, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then they jump ship because why did you bring me here? I'm a 4-star general working for you and you're telling me what to do. I'm going to go somewhere where my talent's appreciated. And they shoot themselves in the foot. Yeah. So it's continually about what results do you want in your organization? Maybe you're okay with the way things are and you like running around and you're addicted to the scramble, into the chaos. Okay. But if you want to do it differently, you want different results out there, then the results out there start in here.
Yeah. So I want to unpack this a little bit because you were talking about a motorcycle, and I have a client who's a founder, owner, business owner. And he was like, yeah, I'm on the like, ring, like, right. Like he's like, the motorcycle is always wound up and he's like, I need to get to like the chug, 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 right? Like a different cadence, and exactly what you're talking about where and I want you to like walk us through this because it can seem so real. You know, when he's like, I've got these deadlines and these 5 projects due in 4 days and I am in charge. So we can't stop for family dinner. Like we sleep when we're dead, right? Like we don't have time for all that. It seems so important. So like for the listener who's like in that place, like, okay, that sounds great, but I have a 3-year-old over here. I got to do this, everything. It seems so real. And like, there's not an option. Like there's no option for doing it this differently.
There's the blinders.
There's the blinders. Yes.
Yeah. So, there's no option. I love it. And I would encourage to look, is this just relative to this particular situation, or is this pattern one that's been going on all the way back that you can see how you adopted it? Oh, now we see. I like when you get to the genesis, like, oh yeah, okay, this is how, when I did this thing, it made dad happy. And when I learned to win, and or dad was an alcoholic, so I always had to be the one who showed up and took care of everybody, and the family survival depended on it. And that gets so ingrained, the thought process changes the brain. This is the brilliant thing for me, is that when you start to change your thinking, it now can change your brain to whatever you want, that neuroplastic quality we have. So it's about rehearsing a certain way of thinking and knowing that if you do that consistently over time, it's actually going to change the structure of your brain and allow you to move in alignment with what you truly want. So often people don't change. They don't have enough dissatisfaction or enough clarity of where they want to go, those two things. And they believe this is all that can happen. They're looking at it wrong. To be a founder, you have to back up and let others shine. I see it so many times when somebody backs up or leaves an organization, the other people who are there rise up. They stand up. They rise up. The people want an opportunity to do that. But it's the mindset this individual thinking he has to be the one doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's climbing down the mountain. And I'd say, where do you need to be on the mountain? You need to be at
Yeah.
the top where you can
Yeah.
see the furthest, where you can think strategically, where you can think with innovation. You can look forward 5 years. But now
Mm-hmm.
you're down here in the trenches. Nobody's piloting the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, we're not going to get anywhere unless you make a commitment to pilot the ship and
Mm-hmm.
to learn to delegate, communicate, trust others to do a lot of these things that shouldn't be on your plate.
Mm-hmm. So in what's coming up for me is like burnout and pressure, right? And like
Mm-hmm,
exhaustion. And
mm-hmm,
maybe your answer
mm-hmm,
would be the same to what you just were talking about. But for the leader, the high achiever, the person who's going after something, who is constantly in that go mode,
mm-hmm.
what is that? Again, that kind of the trailhead, the starting point to go like to shift from exhaustion to expansion and actually enjoying it. Like what does that look like?
It's so interesting. So I have a group of business owners. And the first time we met, we just had a kind of an open dialogue, talk
Mhm.
about your experience. And it was amazing around the table, everybody thinking about hanging it up, exhausted, burned out. And a huge takeaway for them was that they weren't alone because we all walk around alone together, which is the
Yeah.
wild thing. We all carry this stress, but we show everybody our best face. We always act
Mhm.
like we got our shit together, even though we're
Mhm.
struggling under the surface. And
Right.
as a business owner, you don't let others know how you're doing. You don't talk to people about money. As a business executive, as a leader, it's kind of lonely at the top, right?
Yeah.
Having a place where you can let your guard down is key. Having a coach like yourself or myself, somebody you can talk to, and to get that perspective, absolutely key. And the thing I loved about these folks that I worked with, they had lost their vision. They had vision when they started. They were
Mhm.
excited, but then they got caught in the day to day, ensnared by those pesky patterns that they adopted early on.
Yep.
Hadn't learned to let go of them
Yeah.
and to be okay. Maybe be okay even when it doesn't feel okay, and
Yeah.
to allow others to step up and do things a little differently, but let them do
Yeah.
it. And I
Right.
tell you,
And
that's the magic.
differently sometimes means not as well as you would have done it.
Oh, I hear that every week.
Right. And like,
Nobody,
no, I
nobody's
can't. The client will. Yeah. But
nobody's
yeah,
got the same commitment I have.
you
Right, you're
don't.
the owner.
Yeah.
And so, are you going to stay here, wringing your hands, completely stressed out all the time, or are you going to actually allow others to do it their way? It may
Yeah.
not be quite to your standard, but they're going to do it. We're going to systemize it, make sure
Mhm.
it's done consistently. There's a quality check,
Mhm.
and then you take your family on vacation to Rome, or
Uh-huh. No, listen, I want people to hear that because that's what I would hear a lot. Like, they don't, I just want my people to have like the same vision and passion. And I'm like, no, you don't. They would have their
Mhm,
own company. Like,
mhm.
if
Yeah, right.
they
That's
would
not
be
who
the
they
CEO of
are.
their own company. Like, yeah. So yeah,
So,
just
and
don't
what
miss
you're
that.
saying though is right on. Then that becomes the role of the executive or the owner or the leader to make sure everybody understands the vision.
Yeah.
How, because they want to be part of something. And
Yeah.
when there's nobody at the top articulating the vision and how important their role is in the achievement of this larger thing, then it just becomes a job. Then you see their
Yeah.
engagement goes down and they just jump through the hoops going along to get along. But
Yeah.
if you can inspire them with the vision and connect with them, it's a totally different skill set. And it's not
Yeah.
about checking boxes. It's not about dialing in the next quarter's returns every
Yeah.
day. It's
Yeah.
about creating a culture and helping people feel inspired, engaged, motivated to see the vision
Mhm.
and to take up arms moving that direction. When
Yeah.
you do that, you have an unstoppable organization.
Yeah, there we go. Amazing. Okay, so before I ask you my very last question,
Okay.
tell the listeners where can they connect with you, the work that you're doing, find out more about what's happening in your world. Tell them where they can find
Oh,
you.
absolutely. Yeah, easy. Mays, my last name is Mays, Mays, maysleadership.com. I have a daily email that goes out, a daily story, a business lesson. I write literally every day. I get up and I write. So you can subscribe to that. I've got a new book coming out. Probably will be launched late summer, early fall. Very excited about that. The book's title, Lead Yourself First. And
Mm.
we have business growth programs as well. So yeah, check it out. I'd love to be connected. And I just love this stuff like you, right? This is the stuff that feeds my soul.
Gets
So
us
it's fantastic.
excited.
Absolutely. So yeah, go to
Amazing.
maysleadership.com.
That's great.
Love
I'll
it.
have that in the show notes for listeners.
Thank you.
So for my very last question that I like to
Mm,
ask all of the guests, what
sure.
does it mean to you, Dr. Kevin, to live an unblocked life?
Isn't that brilliant? And if, I feel like it's a great capstone to the whole conversation
Uh,
because an unblocked life is just that, letting go of the constraints that we develop ourselves. We come into the world and we're feral little creatures, and we learn these patterns of how we become socialized to fit into our this normative culture of our family, and being able to let go of that and really choose that is unblocked. And we think often we fool ourselves and think we're doing it. It's a continual process. It's not like we just arrive. It's a pathway that continually it runs deep, and it's a lifetime pathway. So being unblocked, I think of the greatest historical figures throughout time,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I love
Whether
that.
it's
It's not an arrival, like you said. Like,
no,
yeah.
yeah. But I think about Jesus, the Buddha, Krishna, Gandhi. There are figures who learned how to be and live in that place where they didn't react to the physical sensations. Christ on the cross being executed, stabbed with a spear, saying, "Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." He didn't lose his equanimity. He kept that connection with this larger whole. He stayed unblocked. If we live in a miserable world, it's our miserable world. And with your thinking, you can change that.
Okay, well, there's a mic drop. There we go. Amazing. That was so good. I hope y'all are feeling this and feeling that the inspiration, the motivation um to start to like become aware of and question and maybe even let go some of these patterning so that you can start leading and living from a place of truth. Yeah.
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 Adopting uh, a discipline
Yeah.
that continually allows you to step into your own truth. And it's not an idea.
Yeah.
Don't cling to ideas, but to a deeper presence. That's the wisdom.
Yep.
So here's to everybody listening on your pathway to wisdom.
Thank you.
Congratulations for the next step you're taking and for hanging out with us during this
Yeah.
podcast. It's been awesome.
Yes. Amazing. Yes. So thank you, Dr. Kevin, for being here, for sharing your wisdom, not knowledge, but your wisdom and experience with us is so good. I appreciate you being here. And for listeners, if something that he said cracked you open or lit a fire, share this episode. Send it to a friend who maybe is stuck in that go mode, or the colleague who looks like they have it all together, but just like someone said to Dr. Kevin, like, you don't look excellent. Maybe share this with them. And if you are ready to go deeper, you know where to find me. Let's clear that clutter. Let's unblock your brilliance and having you live a life that feels as good as it looks. Until next time, my friends, stay open, stay free.